All right, so let's jump into some of the history here. And like I mentioned at the top, the story of Dusty Springfield is the story of a girl who struggled with her own identity and even her own sexuality for a lot of her life. So she wore this Dusty persona as both a shield and to shield. You might be buzzing a lot, Rob. I'm getting like a. All right, seems to have stopped.
Now we can't hear Phil.
Yeah, and Phil, I can't hear
Really?
you.
You can't hear me? I'm gone.
Oh, there
Now
you
I
go.
hear you.
I was just talking like this, you know
Okay, that
what
probably.
I'm saying?
So she wore this Dusty persona as both a shield from her own anxiety, but also as a channel through which she could express herself. And she often said in interviews that she felt conflicted about being two different people. That could also play into the fact that she was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder in the 1980s as well. So her story is one of talent and torment. But for today, we're going to focus on her life leading up to the release of this debut album.
Can I just
Now,
give her one more compliment before you jump into it, Adam? That
yeah, sure, of course.
Dusty is a great stage name. I'm kind of
Right.
surprised more people have not taken that on. It's her and Dusty Rhodes, the wrestler, as far as like a
Right, and also like, isn't it like Dusty Fingers or something from like the Three Amigos or
Dusty Bottoms.
Dusty Bottoms, right?
One for each other and all for one. I'll cut that. All right, so our story begins back on April 16th of 1939 when Dusty was born, Mary Isabel Catherine Bernadette O'Brien. And as a quick reminder, Hitler would invade Poland just 6 months after her birth. So it's putting some timeline context there.
I thought you were going to say, as a quick reminder, that was also the Molly Shannon character from SNL.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Mary Catherine Gallagher, man. Get it right.
Oh yeah, I thought you were going to tell us what the acronym stood for.
Oh, right. Need to come up with one then. So she was born into a middle-class family of Irish parents. Her father was an accountant. Her mother stayed at home and raised her and her brother, Tom, whose birth name was actually Dionysius.
Sick.
And he goes by
Badass.
Tom. Yeah, it's pretty badass. We should convince our Tom, another host on this show, to go by Dionysius.
I actually know a guy with that name, believe it or not. He goes by Dion.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer.
I see it now. I see it now. All right, thank you. How did I not notice that? All right. So her mother had big dreams of being a professional dancer, but those dreams died when she got married and had kids, something that put Dusty off, something that she had put off for as long as possible. And her mother, Kay, and her father, Gerard Anthony O'Brien, they had a rough marriage. Her parents were both terribly unhappy together, but since they were Catholic, separating was out of the question. And Dusty actually couldn't recall any warmth or affection between her parents, and she was put off to the idea of marriage at a very early age. Her mother held a ton of resentment. Say it again.
So there's the alcoholism. There it is.
Her mother held on to a ton of resentment for her father for ruining her dreams to be a dancer. See, kids, just remember, marriage ruins dreams. So Dusty recalled screaming matches between her parents when she, Dusty, would go over to the burning hot radiator pipes and just hold them until her hands were scalded. This is at a very young age that she remembers doing this, an early sign of the eventual self-destructive behavior that would come out of her in the 1970s and 80s. She wound up being admitted for self-harm and for alcoholism at one point in her life. So this torment started early in her life, but it wasn't all terrible. The house was very musical. Hey, there's something good. So her grandparents, not sure which side, they were members of a traveling Gilbert and Sullivan show in the 1920s. So entertainment was definitely floating around. Her father was a pianist and he loved big band, big jazz music, a lot of big band.
Alive, right?
He loved beer too, right?
Yes, I assume. They didn't mention his alcoholism in the book,
Okay.
but yeah, we can assume.
Sounds more playful. We don't count that.
So there's not a lot of information on what the family did during the war, but if they were like most people, they got the hell out of London. But Dusty does recall one of her earliest memories being seeing a banana for the first time after the war ended and after all the rationing had stopped. Actual fruit was like one of her formative childhood memories of the war ending.
Weird.
So around age 10, her family had moved out of London into an area about 40 miles west called High Wycombe, where she started attending primary school at a convent school called St. Augustine's, but she quickly tested into another convent school. And from there to another convent school, all within 2 years, she wound up bouncing around to 3 different schools and landed at a place called Sisters of Charity of St. John Antide Thuray. Doesn't really matter. That might come up on trivia at some point, so you can tuck that away in your back pocket.
Hold on. Can we talk about what a convent school is? Is that just a school run entirely by nuns?
Entirely by nuns. Yes. So
But not one where you train to become a nun.
correct. Although it sounds like they leaned hard on that. So she was a 13-year-old in a Catholic school in England and was learning from these nuns that the number one life goal for any young girl is to become a nun.
Sure.
Getting married and having kids was the close runner-up.
They're like, look, do you hate children and know zero about education? You should be
You should be a teacher.
you should be a nun teacher.
Oh, that is pretty silly.
Oh God.
But even at that young age, she knew she didn't want to get married or become a nun because she already had aspirations to have a singing career. So now, according to a longtime friend and just witnessing every child ever, she went through a pudgy phase in her teens. And her friends said that she was stodgy, chubby little legs, big glasses, awful shoes. She wasn't into sports. She wasn't good at school. Not the most confident kid in the world.
These are her friends saying this, huh?
A friend saying she was a little fat.
What did the enemies say, Adam?
So nice. Yeah. Now, she did have one driving interest outside of her musical aspirations, and that would be following the lives of all the big Hollywood stars that were in the early tabloids and trashy celebrity magazines that were around already in the 50s. And in fact, one of Dusty's favorite memories was her going with her mother to the movies midday and sitting through the same movie twice. And they would do this all the time just to get away from reality and immerse themselves into the glitz and glamour of Hollywood.
You know,
And
one time, I was on a camping trip and it was so hot that I went to the movies and I saw Ratatouille, and it was pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Is this a family camping
By
trip? Or
yourself,
was this
or-
like, you went by your, like, you were like, I'm going to go fishing. And then you got in the car and drove to a
It was
movie.
just too hot. I had to get into the air conditioning. That's
So
it. That's
whatever-
the whole story. It doesn't roll up to anything meaningful.
It's all good. And one of her big takeaways from all of this Hollywood stuff is that peroxide meant fun. And she started to build up this love of the Hollywood starlets like Marilyn Monroe and Betty Grable. And when she was around 15 years old, she and her brother Tom, who was about 5 years older than her, formed a musical duo, and they started performing folk music at nightclubs around their town. Now, Tom was 5 years older, so he had a bit more chops. He had been gigging for a while. And so this is where Dusty started cutting her teeth as a singer and overall performer. And at 16 years old, still struggling with her identity and I assume her sexuality at this point. Remember, it was not okay for Catholic schoolgirls to be attracted to other girls. So she decided the person looking back at her in the mirror, the dorky Mary O'Brien, was not going to make it as a singer. And at this rate, she was doomed to become a librarian. So flash forward 1 year at her school reunion, and people didn't recognize her. Didn't recognize her. She went from long hair, brunette, government-issued glasses to high heels, blonde, full makeup. And for the next 25 years, the old Mary O'Brien lived underneath the facade that at this point had not yet become Dusty by name, but was basically Dusty overall.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah.
Hey, Phil. Are those government issued glasses that you're wearing right now?
No, they're not. But I was just gonna say, I don't know if that sounds like amazingly freeing or really, really horrible.
Hey guys, remember when we graduated school and then had a 1 year reunion?
Yeah.
I was curious about that as well. And that's at like 17. Man, things were different in England in the 1960s. I assume everyone went off and had a career.
Well,
by
yeah,
the time
figures
they were
like 50,
17.
51. Like a lot of people got blown up, right? So like they're really
Right.
They're like, do you want to be a nun yet or what?
Right.
Yeah.
That was her Rumspringer. So around this same time, there was a woman in London named Riss Chantel who was putting together a vocal group called the Lana Sisters. Their sound was very Very 1950s, sweet jazzy pop with a vaudeville flavor mixed in. At this point in the UK, skiffle is big, Elvis is big in the US, and those are the big kind of musical movements going on at the time. So Dusty tries out for a spot in this band. She gets the gig. They complete the trio, which consisted of a woman named Rish Chantel, Lynn Abrams, and Dusty, of course. So the leader of the band, Chantel, booked an audition with Southern Music Publishing, and immediately they picked up the Lana sisters and started recording them. So this is Dusty's first foray into recorded music. All right, it's 1951. Dusty is in the Lana sisters, and they score a slot on a TV variety show in England called 6-5 Special, which is a precursor to another pop variety show called Ready, Steady, Go, which Dusty would actually wind up hosting later on. Now, Dusty was only with this group for about a year. She never intended to make it her home, but she wanted as much practice as possible, as much exposure as possible, and she considered this gig basically training grounds for whatever was to come next. And for her, that next gig was getting back together with her brother and his friend Tim, and they formed a band that, as Dusty called it, was sickeningly cheerful folk band called the Springfields. I listened to a decent amount of the Springfields this week. It's fun, but it is definitely sickeningly cheerful. So this band, it was basically the two guys playing guitar. She was in the middle. They were singing 3-part harmonies. There was some percussion, very mamas and papas sounding kind of stuff, or rather Peter, Paul, and Mary sounding stuff. They wind up auditioning in front of a guy named Johnny Franz, who worked for the Philips record company in England. Now, he loved what he heard, and he got them into the studio immediately. And just like that, the Springfields were recording music. And how, I hear you asking, did they come up with the name the Springfields? Well, that's a perfect place for our favorite segment, By the Numbers.
Oh.
Woo, 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 woo. Yay.
Marty, it sounded like you read that off a cue card. Yeah. Oh, yay. All right. First number up, 34. Now, that is the number of states in the U.S., according to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names, that had a Springfield in them. Now, according to Mike Hurst, who was a hired gun in the Springfields after one of their members, Tim, left the band, he said they picked the name Springfield for the American appeal, since there was a Springfield in all 50 states, but that's wrong. Either way, it's a great name. And good on Dusty for using the success of the Springfields for her next iteration and using that as her last name.
Well, that approximate thinking is why Matt Groening chose Springfield for The Simpsons too, right?
Right. Without explicitly saying it, it could be anywhere.
Yeah, it's just like every.
Well, there's no Springfield, Delaware, right?
There probably is.
I think there might be.
I don't know if it's everywhere, but it's one of. It's got to be 34. One of the top town names in the U.S.
There's a Springfield, Pennsylvania in Delaware County. All right. Excuse me. That's for the YouTube that Rob just releases untouched.
Barney sample pack you've been looking for.
Our next number is 23. That is the number of weeks that A Girl Called Dusty stayed in the top 100 in the UK. Number 6.
And yet they can't even put it on Spotify, huh, Adam?
I know. Seriously. Oh, that is a great call out. Thank you, Rob. So we announced last week that this album, the next album, was A Girl Called Dusty. Spotify does not have this. It's some weird stuff where it was released in the UK and has a very specific track listing. At some point, they released it in the US, but with almost a completely different track listing, which kind of goes to Marty's original tweet of it's just a conglomeration of random singles that they threw onto an album. So we had to go through and kind of pick and choose and put together our own playlist to represent what the British release was.
And of course, that's linked in the show notes. And because I have a time machine, now that we're talking about this, I actually linked it in last week's show notes.
Oh, nice work, dude. That's some good shit.
Got an Albinator and a time machine. We're still
That's
working.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're still fucking up. AI's everywhere, you know. Come on.
All right, our next number is the number 6. This album peaked at number 6 on the UK charts. Our next number is 13. Dusty released 13 solo studio albums over the course of her career between 1964 and 1995.
95.
Yeah,
Dang.
she had a bit of a comeback late in her career.
Did it have anything to do with Pulp Fiction?
I saw that her being on the Pulp Fiction soundtrack, that sold something like 2 million albums, and that was actually the highest album sales that she was associated with. And I think there may have been some bump or interest in her as a result of the Pulp Fiction soundtrack.
Sure.
I mean,
that's certainly where I first heard the song.
Right. All right, the next number is 113. That is the number of seconds that Jimi Hendrix and Dusty performed Mockingbird on the show Ready, Steady, Go in 1966. So, Ready, Steady, Go was a televised variety show in England, and Dusty hosted it for a while. And her hosting duties coincided with Jimi Hendrix coming to England on his initial debut. By the way, go see episode 131 for our full Jimi Hendrix episode. Now, Dusty brings on Jimi Hendrix, and she recalls during rehearsals running back and forth to the control room and watching all of the volume meters peg out and go full right. And all the audio engineers are like, they got to turn down, man. And she's like, you can't tell Jimi Hendrix to turn down. So the limited recording, it's less than 2 minutes. It sounds like they are in Jimi Hendrix's amp. All you can hear is the guitar and a little bit of them singing Mockingbird, but it's fantastic. It's rock and roll. It's great. It's a lot of fun.
Well, just to get nerdy for 1 second, the reason that stopped being a problem shortly after that is because we added onboard effects like compression, right?
Well, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a whole bunch.
Where
of
they could
things
dial
changed,
that
right?
back.
Well, I mean, there's also just a massive change in microphone technology, right? So probably back where we're talking, you said 66.
This was in, 66.
Yeah, so like most microphones would have been like ribbon microphones, which just basically pick up in all directions. You definitely would have started seeing like cardioid polar pattern
Directional.
microphones, yeah. But it would
Right.
have been like the late 60s that like sort of like the SM57 would have been invented, and that and the way modern PA works, like it wants that sort of like very local polar pattern. But Jimi
Nice.
Hendrix, like Jimi Hendrix 1966 in England would have been like 2 microphones and just
just go. Yeah, you
And just
couldn't
go.
hear
Yeah.
you couldn't hear
Yeah.
the drums. It was just guitar and Jimmy and Dusty.
I just brought it up because it feels quaint to talk about Jimi Hendrix as loud, given all the music that's happened since him, which has clearly been
Right.
louder.
Was there a thing as too loud? Yeah, there was a thing as too loud. All right, our next number is 2, and that is 2 feet. That's about what Dusty could see without her glasses. So she was remarkably nearsighted, but she refused to wear glasses or contact lenses. She sometimes said that people thought she was too cool for school because they would wave to her from across the room, but she straight up couldn't see them until they were like a couple feet in front of her. So she got a little bit of this reputation of like, oh, well, I guess she ignored me. No, she straight up can't see.
Marty is already, mid comment of my government issued glasses. I definitely would not know who was waving to me until they were within 4 to 6 feet.
Oh, same here, but I wear contacts. But for younger listeners who might not remember, even in our lifetime, contact lenses were way shittier. You had to like put them on with an industrial plunger.
They were hard.
Yeah,
They were
they
hard.
They're like class and very expensive.
Yeah.
And the stuff that you put in them overnight, that had to like chemically break down, because if you didn't allow that, it was like acid in your eyes.
Oh, I still use that
remember.
stuff, Adam.
Oh,
That's
you do?
the good stuff.
That's
Yeah.
good. So her short-sightedness actually also played, according to legend, somewhat
Sightedness.
into her stage performance as well. So again, as the legend goes, she would actually write lyrics on her wrist because she couldn't read cue cards. They were too far away. And she would do this move that became kind of a Dusty move where she would do something dramatic, and you can't see it on the screen here, but she would bring her wrist up to her face in a very dramatic moment. She was reading the lyrics, and she would do it again on the other arm just to sell it. So I thought that was a really fun story because when you watch
He's
her
actually just blind as shit.
right, exactly.
Great, good.
All right, 2 million. That is the number of copies that the Pulp Fiction soundtrack sold. It's a stupid one. I'm going to cut that.
You're stupid.
Yeah, I am stupid. All right, 6.
6? Let me guess, 6 feet under.
Oh,
Sorry.
6 as in 6 gigs a day. So right after the release of this album, Dusty came to the US to do a 12-day stint at the Fox Theater in Brooklyn for a holiday review. And there was a documentary where they were showing the advertisement, and it was nothing but soul singers. And then there was a little section at the bottom that said featuring also, and it was Dusty. So you had Marvin Gaye, the Miracles, the Supremes, Martha and the Vandellas, the Temptations. I think Smokey Robinson was there, and then Dusty at the end. So they were doing 6 gigs a day. Starting at 10 a.m., Dusty would get her 30 minutes, but she was also just hanging out on stage and doing backups with all of the other bands because she knew all the material, and she loved R&B music, and she loved this Motown thing that was happening. So 72 shows in 12 days was probably the most packed her schedule had been.
That's wild, especially for a singer, I feel like.
Yeah, it's demanding. Now, Marty, you talked about the Blue-Eyed Soul thing. And there is this idea about appropriation or taking the music, but she was very inclusive in terms of not trying to like hoard it or try to fake that it was her music. So when she got the gig for Ready, Steady, Go, she brought all of these R&B and Motown artists over to England in 1966 and gave them a platform and really introduced them to an entirely new audience in England. So she was very much spread the love is kind of her mojo as I read in the book.
Well,
yeah, I read that she supported a lot of like black causes, wouldn't play in apartheid South Africa.
That's right. Yeah, right.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like a big deal at the time that she refused to play a segregated show, and it made big headlines, I think, in the UK. It was really her taking a stand.
And she was officially deported out of South Africa. Now, granted, that's just staying on the plane or getting back on the plane, but still pretty badass. All right, and finally, we're going to round it out with the number 20. And that is the amount of time we spend. Hang on. I'm going to do 2 of these and see if this first one's a little bit too schmaltzy, I guess. All right. And we're going to round it out. Our last number is 20, as in 20 hours. That's about the amount of time we spend on each one of these episodes here, from researching to prep to editing to deliver to you what we feel is a fantastic podcast. And truthfully, we love it. I think I speak for the team when I say that we are thrilled at the growing community of complainers that we have created that have jumped on over the last 3 years. So if you're looking for a simple way to support us and keep things going, you can give us a 5-star review. You could tell a friend about us, or you can join our Patreon for free, where we're keeping the conversation going long after this episode airs. That link is patreon.com/1001 album complaints, and it's also in the episode notes. All right, and our last number is 3. And just like Dusty had her 3 favorite wigs that she named, we've got our 3 favorite ways that you can support us here at the podcast, and they're all free. You can give us a 5-star review. You could forward this episode along to a friend, or you can go sign up for our Patreon page where you can keep the conversation going long after the episode airs. So head over to patreon.com/1001 album complaints. And as usual, the link is in the episode notes. Either one of those you like more than the other? Was the 20 hours a little bit too much like, oh, look how much we work?
No, I liked it. It's honest.
All right, cool. All right, so when we last left the band, they had just recorded with Johnny France. Now, in the late 1950s, there wasn't really such a thing as a producer, officially, that I learned. You basically had guys like Johnny France who were responsible for an artist, and then everything associated with that artist, like setting up the recording sessions, drawing up the contracts, managing the signatures, authorizing payments to everyone involved, and critiquing the music along the way. So this was the very early version of a producer, which I found really crazy.
Yeah. Well, I remember we learned about in the Elvis episode that Sam Phillips over at Sun Records, he got a big name because he was like one of the only dudes in the country who knew something about sound.
It's a big deal. Yeah. So Franz joined the Phillips Record Company in 1954 as an A&R guy, but he also knew his way around a piano. He also had perfect pitch, and he had a good eye for talent. And he saw a lot of potential in Dusty, who at the time and on the album liner notes was still listed as Mary O'Brien on these Springfield albums. Now, the Springfields, their first single called Dear John was not a big hit, but they did get a call out in 1961 in the publication NME as one of the 10 future star attractions. We've all seen those lists every year, who to keep an eye on. Usually they're wrong, but they got it right with the Springfields.
I had no idea NME was going on that long.
They've been around for a while. It's crazy.
What did Pitchfork have to say about the album?
You know what? I did.
37%.
Wait, did you say 37%? Is that their rating scale? They do percent?
100?
No,
I think they do out of 10.
Out of 10.
Well, then 3.
And it's not a percent.
They're 3.7.
You can tell Phil's a fan.
You're thinking Rotten Tomatoes, I think.
Oh, that's it.
Thinking, dude, thinking.
You're not thinking.
Phil's still in his story about going to the movies.
Yeah, he's thinking about like how the popcorn tastes.
Yeah, you guys want me to retell somebody else's Pink Floyd movie going story?
Favorite story of all time. So the band gets some radio slots and even a spot on the Benny Hill Show. And their reach kept growing. And eventually in 1962, they score a top 20 hit in the US with a song called Silver Threads and Golden Needles. I'll drop a clip of that here. It's just for context. We don't need to talk about it.
Wait, the Benny Hill Show, that like cheesy.
Yeah, I couldn't.
That was going on.
Yeah,
that was going on in that time period.
Yeah,
Is it
like
possible it was a
different. I'm sure it was the same Benny Hill, but was it? Did he have a sketch
Different
show
format,
and a
probably.
talk show? Yeah.
I couldn't find any clips of them. All I found was just text that said that they appeared on it. I assume it was some type of little musical thing. So they
I used to love that show.
Okay.
I would always watch it when I was a kid, the Benny Hill Show, because it would come on after school. And I don't know why I thought that, like, because there's always like sexually suggestive, like
the nurse with the tits,
big boobed window, yeah,
right.
I would always hope that somehow like they would just like pop out and I'd catch a glimpse. You know what I mean?
Well, it was the UK, so you know there were
this never happened.
This hasn't been prevented at all.
It's gonna make a note here of what 10 minutes to cut out. 38 minutes.
Just put yakety sax over this whole section.
Yeah.
All right. So they go on to release a debut album called Kinda Folksy. Oh God,
that's brutal.
And
they probably heard like Kinda Blue, maybe, and
they're like,
yeah, we'll do this.
You know, if you imagine Larry David saying it, it's all right. It's kind of folksy. Then it's like just all right.
So they released that in 1962, and it does relatively well. But after the initial euphoria of being in the Springfields wore off, Dusty got frustrated with the band and was setting her sights on her own R&B music dreams. But the Springfields were doing pretty well. The song Island of Dreams, which was released as a single, not on their debut album, spent 6 months in the top 100 and was the 4th best-selling single of 1963. Not too bad. So the band's doing well, but Dusty's getting antsy. But it didn't really matter because everyone wanted to move in different directions anyway. Dusty wanted to go more pop. Her brother wanted to stay in the same folk world. And he was also getting annoyed with Dusty's elaborate outfits and gowns, but they couldn't find an excuse to break up with all the success and the money that was coming in. I was thinking it's kind of like disposable pets that just won't die. Anybody?
Is it like that?
I had a
do they make you money?
I had a guinea pig as a kid named Tribbles.
I think it's more like being in the band Metallica or something.
But go on. Let's hear about this animal. Like, let's hear about all the bad things you said to it.
Yeah, Tribbles. So I had a guinea pig as a kid. We went to the pet store, and my dad asked the guy about how long do guinea pigs live. He's like, 2 years. He had gotten hamsters and guinea pigs mixed up. So the guinea pig I had, Mr. Tribbles, lived 7 years. It would not die. And I don't know if you know about guinea pigs, but they're really boring animals. They don't really do anything. You take them out of their cage, they just piss on the carpet in front of you. It was not good.
That's why we test shit on them.
Right. Oh, God.
Keep it interesting.
They're pretty
The ASPCA boycotts this album. All right. So the band is on the verge of breaking up, but they're just having too much success. They released a Christmas album, which did well. That success allowed them an opportunity to travel to Nashville to record another album of folk songs that they called Folk Songs from the Hills, which was a mix of hillbilly and rockabilly. But that album also did well.
At least they accepted their genre at that point.
Maybe that's the problem. It's like I'm trying. For my next record, I'm not going to try it all.
So they returned home from this Nashville trip to discover that they were the #1 vocal group in England for the 2nd year in a row. They just can't catch a break and fail. Now, finally, in October of 1963, they do finally decide to break up. They're all miserable, but they break up despite all the success and the money coming in.
It's too bad, because if they hadn't, they would have continued to be the greatest vocal group of Britain indefinitely, right?
Right, of course. Within 1 week of their breakup, Dusty releases her first single, I Only Want to Be With You. And I believe this is the time that she officially...
That's the Hootie song, yeah. I know. I was waiting for Phil to jump in.
I want to be with you, yeah. I've been looking for a girl like you, yeah.
Slightly different.
That's definitely going on the internet.
And it's at this point that she officially adopts the name Dusty and obviously used the name Springfield from the prior band. And releasing a song only 1 week after the breakup, obviously she had recorded that song prior and was just plotting her exit from the band and just wanted to have something ready to go whenever it happened. So that first Dusty single hits the charts at number 18 in the UK, goes all the way up to number 4, stayed in the charts for 13 weeks and sold 1 million copies worldwide. Not bad for the start of a solo career. And that's a great spot for me to veer off into a little segment I want to try out. No, it's not Is It Punk? But instead it's a little trivia for our crew here. And it's a new segment I'm calling Damn, those are some tig old cities. So since we're focusing...
I'm going to go ahead and suggest you cut this.
Today, we're focusing on... focusing on a star whose last name matches the city of Springfield in any one of 38 states. We're going to play a little game where I'm going to give you a clue. You'll need to tell me the celebrity name and the state where their city last name is from. For example, if I said he was a founding father and 4th president of the United States, you would chime in and say James Madison, Wisconsin. Okay?
No, you wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. I would not say that.
All right,
I was going to say Abraham
this.
Lincoln.
Let's do this. Focus.
All right. I didn't know who the 4th president was either. I just needed a good example. All right. Let me bring up the chat. And if you guys just want to put like a period in the chat and hit enter when you want to call in, because I want to finish the clue before you guys dive in. And then I'll call you whoever was first. We'll see if that works.
Sure.
All right. This 6'2" point guard for the Dallas Mavericks was actually born in Melbourne, Australia in 1992. All right. Between 2011 In 2023, he played for the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Boston Celtics, and the Brooklyn Nets. First name initial starts with a K.
I think you needed Alan for this one.
I know. For some reason, I thought you guys. Right, I'm
going to guess. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
California.
Yeah, right. All right.
But is the answer supposed to be a state?
It's okay. The answer for this one was Kyrie Irving, Texas.
Oh, damn it. I knew that.
All right. This one I think we'll be able to do. All right.
Oh, God.
Love trying out new material on the road. This actor / stuntman / jackass jump-started his career on a reality stunt show on MTV in the early 2000s. Marty, take it away.
Sorry, one more time. Please repeat the question.
Wait, did you chime in?
Oh, no, that was last time. That's Rob.
Oh, shit. All right. Rob.
Yeah.
Johnny, Knoxville, Tennessee, Adam.
There it is.
Oh, damn. Whoop, whoop.
All right. I had two other sports ones that I don't even know these. All right, so here we go. Another non-sports one.
Are these questions you would get, Adam?
Of course not. This American actor, known for his dark and eccentric characters, once played Emperor Commodus in the movie Gladiator, and more recently painted his face to play the Joker. Rob again.
It's Joaquin Phoenix, Arizona, Adam.
Yeah.
Also his hometown.
And all right, here's our last
hometown. No,
this is a bit of a
born Leaf Phoenix for all the nerds out there.
Really?
Yeah, River's brother.
Oh, I guess I did know that. All right, we're gonna round out this one. Though never mentioned by Mo Sislak, you could imagine that this gentleman may share an apartment with Hugh Jass, Oliver Closeoff, and Ivana Tinkle.
Oh, I know.
Marty.
I'm going to say Ben Dover, Delaware.
Yes! You got
yeah, baby. Let's go.
The entire point of that segment was to get that joke out. So thank you guys for playing along. So we're back to Dusty and her rapid rise to popularity only a month after leaving the Springfields. So Dusty is ready to take charge of her career and begins to lean hard into soul music. She always hated that term blue-eyed soul, but that's the bucket that they throw her into. And along with Johnny Franz, her prior producer, she goes into the studio and records the tracks that would ultimately appear on this album, A Girl Called Dusty. Now, I couldn't find a ton of information on the actual recording of this album, but here's a couple notes I was able to dig up. So Dusty wanted to be involved in the whole process. She didn't want to be that diva that just showed up, sang the line, and left. Now, that means she was also personally invested and was known to be a bit difficult to work with in the studio. And according to Ivor Ramond, who did a lot of the arrangements on this album, he said that Dusty took personal interest in the music. She was a perfectionist. She'd get annoyed with bad musicians. She even tried to tell the bass players how to play. So Dusty was at least aware that the Motown and R&B scene, guys like James Jamerson, were running directly into the board and not using picks. So she'd roll into these sessions and see the bass playing through an amp with a pick.
Can we all just lay into bass player jokes?
Hold on a second. Are you saying that Dusty Springfield got involved in the bass pick debate?
Yes, she was team no pick, because that's the sound that she heard coming out of the US that she loved.
Also, as someone who did not play an instrument, she felt like she could just tell the bass player exactly what to do.
Yeah.
That would be fine too.
So she fostered she pissed off a lot of people. Who's this chick coming in and telling everybody how to play? Because she really, her musical knowledge ended pretty quickly in a room full of hired studio musicians, pros.
If you can sing, it's a very, very special gift, because at the end of the day, you can just sing the line and just say, like, fucking play the line.
You do the Michael Jackson thing, right?
I was going to say, yeah, we talked about it. Full demos of just him humming.
Yeah.
One time when I was a teenager, I saw a cover of Bass Player magazine, and it had a picture of Paul McCartney playing bass and singing on a microphone, and it said bass plus vocals equals more gigs. And I always...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you might as well do something worthwhile with your life.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're McCartney. That combo might work out for you.
I love the idea that he's not getting gigs until he starts singing.
Yeah.
So now for this album, Dusty also complained that the studio where they recorded it had no high end. So she would often take the microphones, they would run cables, and she would go into the bathroom or into the hallway. And she had this other thing she did where she turned the headphones up so loud she couldn't hear herself. In fact, one of the engineers said on multiple occasions they kept giving her more volume because she kept saying over the mic, "I can still hear myself more." So I don't know if she was just not used to singing in a studio, but she had
maybe she was blind and deaf. Also,
which would be that's why you should vote this album on, because that is a miracle.
Some Helen Keller shit.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
But people have speculated too. It's about her nervousness, her lack of confidence, as she didn't want to hear herself. She knew that she could sing. She knew she would hit the notes, but she didn't want to hear herself in the mix, which is interesting. She was also a perfectionist. So there are stories of her starting a song like 30 times because she got the syllable wrong. She didn't like the way she said so they'd rewind the tape and start it over again. She would sometimes go word by word, continually erasing and starting over the vocal track until she had built out the line, and then that one would be done.
Axl Rose style. Her and Axl could have done a record, right? Yeah. And they might still be working on one right now.
That's Chinese Democracy 2, 12 years after.
Not a good way to work.
Not
all right. So on April 17th of 1964, a 25-year-old Dusty Springfield releases a debut called A Girl Called Dusty. And I think I mentioned it at the top. It was not immediately released in the USA. Later on, about a year later, a US version was released. Apparently, it had a bunch of different tracks on it and different ordering. I wasn't able to find the actual difference in the track listings. So I'm going to leave some meat on the bone here because, like Rob said, she does have another album on the list that was released 5 years after this one, and also includes the big hit "Son of a Preacher Man." But
one thing I was I found out today, that's hopefully not too diving into the rest of the Be on the Boat, is that there is some question about her sexuality and whether or not she was gay or not, which I think she ended up being gay. But when I was doing a little research, I found this subreddit called Gaylor Swift, and it is a community devoted to finding all of these like hidden coded messages from Taylor Swift to tell the world that she is gay. And there was a link to all these similarities between Taylor Swift and Dusty Springfield about how she wears her hair in certain music videos, some of her outfits that she has, some of the symbolism they call them Easter eggs, and some of her videos are specific calls.
She tells bass players what to do.
Yeah, she tells bass players what to do. It was probably the longest Reddit post I'd ever seen. So, that's a gift from me to the audience to look it up.
There is an interesting similarity, I think, between Dusty's hairstyle and some of Taylor's hairstyles.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Phil, you'll love this post. It's really long.
Yeah, all right. I'll happily entertain nonsense.
It's a really long conspiracy theory. Send it over.
That goes nowhere. That's an important part.
So to quickly round out her story, Marty, yes, she does come out in an interview in 1970. She comes out as bisexual, which was a big deal. Ultimately, though, she would lean more towards women. At one point in the 80s, she did get married, though it was not legally, to a woman, and it didn't end happily. But she wound up going to the U.S. in the early 80s as well to try to restart her career. But the U.S. kind of chewed her up and spat her out, and she came back home to the UK with a drug and alcohol problem. and she's been battling with her bipolar disorder most of her life. And although
that should be a lesson to everybody listening in the UK, is that like America will chew you up and spit you out.
and destroy you. That's lovely.
Yeah.
She attempted
tell me she made a rap album at some point.
She did not, but the closest thing would be a comeback with the Pet Shop Boys.
Oh yeah,
in the 1980s. And sadly, she died in March of 1999 of breast cancer at only 59 years old. So
that's a bummer.
A sad way to end it, but
get your mammograms, single woman listener.
What do you say we dive in to some of these tunes?